So, Dhanvat Pranam, dear devotees, let's start with prayer, glorifying our Guru Parampara. Om Ajnanatirmirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshe Tarini. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Shri Brahma Samhita ki jai, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Swami Thakur ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Guru Maharaj ki jai. Hare Krishna. So I'll just share the screen and we'll start the discussion. Hare Krishna. So I hope I'm audible to everyone.
Yes, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Bol. So we are on 5.31. We'll be reading 5.31 of Sri Brahma Samhita today. This particular section that we are reading is very, very beautiful because Brahmaji is describing very personal aspects about the Lord. He's talking about the dham of the Lord. He's talking about how the Lord looks, the Lord's appearance, the dham and his pastimes. So it's very, very beautiful, and it gives us an insight into how the spiritual world actually is. And Brahmaji is speaking out of experience because all these visualizations had come to him. And so he's describing all these things. And this particular shloka, if we see from 29, 30, 31, there is a description of Krishna's form, there is description of Krishna's pastimes. And this shloka also is in the same theme because Brahmaji here is talking about how the Lord looks and also what he does in the spiritual world. So a very, very beautiful shloka. And apart from this shloka, we'll read some other shlokas also from Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, from Chaitanya Charitamrita, where this glorification of the Lord's pastimes will come. Okay, there is the description of the pastime that comes in this particular shloka in 5.31 is about the pastimes of the Lord with his devotees, right? Because it's mentioned that he revels in pastimes of love. So those pastimes are the pastimes with the gopis, and that is misunderstood many a times. People misinterpret that, and they take it in a very negative way. But these pastimes actually are of a very high grade. And the problem in this world is that whatever we see with our material senses, whatever we experience with our material senses, we try to superimpose that in spiritual life also, which is a mistake that a lot of people do. So through these other shlokas and Prabhupada's beautiful purports, we'll try to understand how these pastimes of the Lord are of a very high level, and it is difficult for us with our limited senses to understand this. So we'll try to learn the correct mood in which we have to approach these pastimes of the Lord. Okay, so we'll start reading 5.31. So I'll just read it once and then devotees can take turns. Okay. So Sri Brahma Samhita 5.31. आलोल चंद्र कलसद्वनमाल्य वंशी रत्नागदं प्रणय केलिकला विलासं श्यामं त्रिभंग ललितं नियत प्रकाशं गोविंदमादि पुरुषं तमहं भजामि. So Anita Mataji and then
Mataji, Hare Krishna. Alola Chandra Kalasatvanamaalaya Vamshi Ratnangadam Pranaya Keli Kala Vilasam Shyamam Tribhangalalitam Niyata Prakasham Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna, thank you, Mataji. So, Bhuvna Devi Mataji, you want to read the translation?
Yes, Mataji. Hare Krishna, Dandat Pranam Mataji. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, around whose neck is swinging a garland of flowers, beautified with the moon locket, those hands are adorned with flute and jeweled ornaments, who always reveals in pastimes of love, whose graceful threefold bending form of Shyamasundara is eternally manifest. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Mataji. So, this particular shloka is, as I mentioned, that it's continuing the theme. It's continuing the description of Lord Krishna's form and also the pastimes of the Lord. Now, with regard to form, we'll see what is this shloka telling. So this shloka is telling what is the Lord wearing around his neck. So it is mentioned that he is wearing this beautiful garland. There is a description of Lord Krishna's garland, and also the three-fold bending form of the Lord, and also the garland is made up of flowers and which are very beautiful, and also there is a moon locket that Lord Krishna wears, and on his two hands, what is there? His two hands are adorned with the flute and jeweled ornaments. And what does he do? Now, this is the description of the Lord's form, but what does he do? He revels in pastimes of love, and his graceful threefold bending form of Shyam Sundar is eternally manifest. Okay, so this particular shloka, if we see the word-to-word translation, then these particular words are very, very significant. First of all, pranaya, that means of love, and keli kala means in pastimes, and vilasam, who always revels. So Lord Krishna is always reveling. That means he is always enjoying these pastimes of love in the spiritual world. Okay. Now I'll just read the purport. 1 second. So Srila Prabhupada is saying in the purport that in the shloka beginning with Chintamani Prakara, that is 2 shlokas before this one. So in that shloka, the transcendental region, that means the spiritual world and the spiritual names of Govinda were described. And then in the shloka beginning with Venum Kvananta, that was the previous shloka which we heard on Friday. The eternal beautiful form of Govinda was described, and in this shloka, the amorous pastimes of Govinda, that means the pastimes of love of Lord Krishna, is described, and he is the embodiment of 64 excellences. All the spiritual affairs that come within the scope of description in the narration of the ecstatic mellow quality rasa are included in the spiritual amorous sports of Govinda. Okay, so just to have a quick recap, let's see what 5.30 and 5.29 were mentioning. So in the previous shloka, that is 5.30, it was mentioned that Brahmaji is praying that I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept in playing on his flute, with blooming eyes like lotus petals, with head decked with peacock's feather, with the figure of beauty tinged with the hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids. So let's remember these things, because all this is beautifying Krishna, right? All these things, or the peacock feather, then his flute, his blooming eyes, and which are like lotus petals, and the complexion of Lord Krishna, the hue of blue clouds, his unique loveliness, which can charm millions of cupids. That was mentioned in 5.30. And the shloka before that, it was mentioned that Govinda, the primeval Lord, is the first. So Lord Krishna is tending the cows, yielding all desire, and his abode was described as built with spiritual gems, and he's surrounded by millions of purpose trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds of thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis. So these shlokas are all building up, the beautiful dham of Krishna, the beautiful form of Krishna. Then what is Krishna doing in his dham, and what are his wonderful pastimes with his associates, that is the Gopas and the Gopis. So with that theme, we come to today's shloka, where again the same description of the Lord is continued with further details. So here we get the details of what Krishna is wearing around his neck. He's wearing a beautiful garland of flowers, and also he's wearing a moon locket. And again, his flute is mentioned here, and jeweled ornaments are mentioned here. And more specifically, the pastimes with the gopis, the amorous pastimes are mentioned. And as I mentioned, that Keli Kala, that Pranaya Keli Kala Vilasam, these words are very, very significant because this Keli word comes in the Amanakosh dictionary also, where Srila Jiva Goswami gives this reference, and he says that Keli means sporting or joking. So that is also mentioned elsewhere, because see, these pastimes of the Lord are very, very significant. So because people have this conception generally, in many religions, when they think of God, some of them show God as a very old man. Some say that when God created the universe, and then he had to go and rest because he was so tired. So all these are very incorrect descriptions of Krishna, and through these various references from scriptures, we understand that Lord Krishna is always engaged in loving pastimes with his devotees. Okay, so that is these sporting, joking, loving pastimes. This is what the Lord takes a pleasure in. Now, in this shloka, if we read it deeply, then what is Brahmaji describing? He is describing the spiritual world, and he's also telling us that what happens there. Okay, because if we just read the shloka plain, it may appear very plain. Okay, so Krishna is wearing a garland, he's wearing a locket, and the flute is there, jeweled ornaments are there, and he's having pastimes. But if we think deeply, then this shloka is talking about the spiritual world and what is happening in the spiritual world. So it is giving us a deep insight into what actually goes on in the spiritual world. And through Brahma Samhita, we get to know that the spiritual world is a very amazing place, because it's filled with most amazing spiritual elements, Chintamani, and it is full of varieties of activities, which are the pastimes of the Lord. So it's a very, very, it's a very, very interesting place actually, and things are moving very quickly. It's not a boring place where, okay, one pastime happens and then there is a gap and then people are waiting for the next pastime to happen. No, it's it's very, very fast moving, it's very jubilant, and constantly the Lord is having some pastime or the other with his devotees. And Krishna's form also, if we read through these shlokas, it is most beautiful and attractive. And he is sporting with thousands and thousands of gopis. That is why this Pranaya Kelikala Vilasam is mentioned. Now, when we talk about the pastimes of Lord Krishna, there is a very beautiful shloka in Bhagavad Gita, which is Bhagavad Gita 4.9, where Lord Krishna himself is talking about the divine nature of his pastimes. See, because as I mentioned earlier, whenever there is a description of Krishna's pastimes with the gopis, people tend to take it in a very, very very, very degraded way. They try to superimpose their materialistic thinking of a relationship with a young boy and a young girl on Lord Krishna and Radharani. Lord Krishna and Radharani are non-different. Radharani is Krishna's energy. Energy and energetic can never be separated. And the gopis also, they are all expansions of Radharani. So Lord Krishna's pastimes with the gopis is actually something of a very high spiritual nature which can never be understood with the mundane thought process. And so Lord Krishna himself in 4.9 Bhagavad Gita says that Janma Karma Cha Me Divyam Evam Yo Veti Tatvata Tyaktva Deham Punar Janma Naiti Mameti. So Arjuna, Lord Krishna is saying that his pastimes are of a transcendental nature. And he says that one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. So Lord Krishna's descent from his transcendental abode is described in the 4th chapter, where he says that he comes to annihilate the miscreants and to protect the devotees. And there are so many pastimes which the Lord undertakes. He does so many pastimes with his devotees. But we have to understand that these are not materialistic dealings between a common man and a common woman. These are all of a transcendental nature. Okay, so that is what the Lord is mentioning here. And in this purport to 4.9, Srila Prabhupada mentions that Eko Devo Nitya Leelanurakto Bhakta Vyapi Hridi Antaratma. So he is quoting from the Vedas. This is Purusha Bodhini Upanishad, and Prabhupada is mentioning this particular reference. Now, what is this? What does this shloka mean? It means that the one Supreme Personality of Godhead is eternally engaged in many, many transcendental forms in relationships with his unalloyed devotees. Okay, so it's not that we are just talking about one scripture and taking reference from there and then deducing that Krishna's pastimes are divine. No, even the Vedas, as we are saying, Purusha Bodhini Upanishad is saying that it is all transcendental. His relationship with his unalloyed devotees is transcendental. And Prabhupada mentioned in the purport that this Vedic version is confirmed in this verse of the Gita personally by the Lord. So Vedas are telling us that the pastimes of Krishna are divine. And Lord Krishna himself is telling us in this verse that all his activities are of a transcendental nature. He who accepts this truth on the strength of the authorities of the Vedas and of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and who does not waste time in philosophical speculations, attains the highest perfectional stage of liberation. Simply by accepting this truth on faith, one can, without a doubt, attain liberation. Now, the pastimes of Lord Krishna are so divine that if a devotee is able to understand these, then they are able to attain liberation. That means one can get free from the clutches of this material world simply by understanding the pastimes of Lord Krishna. So, how can these pastimes be of a mundane nature? That's absolutely not possible. And in this purport, in previous to this section, Prabhupada says that a devotee, simply by understanding the transcendental nature of the body and activities of the Lord, attains the abode of the Lord after ending this body and does not run the risk of returning to this material world. So something that can grant liberation to a person, how divine that will be. So that is the divine nature of Lord Krishna's pastimes. And never should one try to use one's limited intelligence to try and understand, oh, what is going on between Lord Krishna and his devotees, because we'll definitely fail. Because the problem is that uh, our senses are limited. We have a tendency to be in illusion. We have a tendency to make mistakes, and we have a tendency to cheat. These are the four problems that we have. So, with this kind of imperfection, how can we try to understand something that is so perfect? We cannot. And that is why we have to rely on authority. We should never try to think that we'll be able to read these books on our own and understand everything. That is why we need Srila Prabhupada's purports. And Prabhupada's purports, when we read them, he covers all different angles, right? Because when he's talking about people who misinterpret the position of God, he talks about impersonalists, he talks about Mayavadis. There also he tells us what different types of Mayavadis are there, what different types of impersonalists are there, so that when we are out in the world and we are meeting such kind of people who have this kind of a mentality, then by the strength of the knowledge that Prabhupada gives us in his purports, we are able to distinguish the right from the wrong. Because there'll be so many people who are very, very educated. They may know all the shlokas of Bhagavad Gita. They may be very good orators. And through that, the way they talk, the way they communicate, the kind of words they use, the language, their whole personality, it may appear that they actually know Bhagavad Gita correctly. But we have to see, are they catching the essence of Bhagavad Gita or not? And in Prabhupada's purports, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's purports, we always see that they are stopping us at every step from deviating from the correct path. So that is why we have to be very, very regular, and we have to be very, very sincere in reading Srila Prabhupada's books. So thank you, all of you, that you are taking this up so seriously. Now, another angle when we read these shlokas. Here, the form of the Lord, his different activities, what he's doing in the spiritual world is described. Now, this is something that is very, very special to our scriptures, because if we see in the material world, generally people have a misconception that God is someone who is an order supplier, right? This description of pastimes with the Lord is generally very, very rare. For me, especially if I say before coming into ISKCON, I had not much knowledge of this. And I also had the similar kind of thinking that many people have, that you pray to God for something. That is why we pray to God, because we want something, because we want a more comfortable life, because we are in trouble, we pray to God. Now, that is good in a way because we believe in the strength of God. But that is a very incomplete understanding. Because 90% of even God believers, leave aside the atheists, even the believers of God, they think that we have to just approach God for something, and they completely misunderstand the position of God. Because they think that who is God? He is someone who is there to fulfill our desire. He is someone that who's very powerful, and therefore whatever we are asking of him, he will be able to grant that to us. Now, the problem comes that what this particular mentality lacks is relationship with God. Yes, you are asking God for something, but what is your relationship with him? Is he just an order supplier? So that means you're just taking service from God. And what happens if that desire, if that wish is not granted, if that wish is not supplied? Then many people change their religion. Many people even become atheists. To that extent they go, because they think that God is supposed to give me everything because I prayed with a very clear heart, clean heart. So whatever I desired, I am supposed to get it. And when that doesn't happen, either they move into another faith or they move completely from the believers section to the non-believers section. So the problem is that there is no loving relationship with God. There is no concept of pleasing the Lord. that we are his servants, that we are meant to please him. That concept is completely absent. Yes, devotees also sometimes ask Krishna for things, and we are told that, okay, even if you have materialistic desires, we should still approach Krishna. But the difference between that mentality and this is that a devotee renders loving devotional service to Krishna. He does seva for Krishna. A devotee understands that God is not my order supplier. God is actually my master. I am his servant. I am an energy of Krishna, and it is my duty to serve my master. And devotees engage in that seva. But yes, if there are some materialistic desires, they ask Krishna, but their faith is different. Their faith is not unwavered if Krishna does not grant the desire because they believe firmly that whatever Krishna does is for my well being. If some desire of mine, if some wish of mine is not fulfilled, then there is something good for me in that which I am not able to understand at this moment. Okay. So we have to get out of that ignorance of that lack of understanding where we totally misread the whole situation. We think that God is a desire fulfiller and that supplier kind of a concept, because every religion has this concept of God, of having this selfish relationship with God. So we have to really come out of that mentality. We don't have to just pray to Krishna to make my material situation comfortable so that I can go on enjoying my life, without any concept of going to the spiritual world and serving the Lord there. We have to understand who God is, what is our relationship with God. Bhagavad Gita clearly tells us all these things, and Bhagavatam further explains that we are all meant to satisfy Krishna, being his energy. Okay, so that correction in our mentality has to be done. And as we are reading this 5.31 shloka, we are understanding that every pleasure, that exists in the spiritual world is in its purest form. God exchanges loving pastimes with his devotees, and all the devotees, they love and serve the Lord there. Now, whatever we see in the material world, here also we see some rasas, we see some love, we see friendship and everything. But the problem is that this is all a reflection of the spiritual world. So everything becomes the opposite here. And that is why the relationship of Lord Krishna with the gopis, which is the highest form of love, when reflected in this material world, it becomes something very, very distorted, and people misinterpret and misuse that. But we have to read these scriptures so that we get the correct understanding. Lord Krishna is actually the supreme enjoyer of all rasas. And the moment we understand this, that we are not the enjoyers, Krishna is the enjoyer, at that moment, immediately we become happy, we become satisfied, and that gives us a higher taste immediately. Because we understand that my happiness lies in pleasing Krishna. If we are constantly running for our own personal enjoyment, then what has happened for millions of lifetimes will keep happening. And what is that? We'll keep changing one body to the other. Because in this particular body, I think that, oh, I have these desires, and then I spend my whole life trying to fulfill these desires. But we have our own karma, we have our own conditioning. So we make mistakes, and then we have to suffer those reactions. And then at the end of our life, we realize, oh, we still have so many unfulfilled desires. Oh, then we get another birth to fulfill those desires, and then another and another. In this way, we have spent millions and millions of lifetimes. But now, when we have become fortunate enough to understand that our happiness lies in pleasing Krishna, then we should immediately change our focus from satisfying ourselves to satisfying Krishna. And now so many festivals are coming. Janmashtami is coming, Srila Prabhupada's appearance day, then Radha Ashtami, all these beautiful festivals are coming. So we get this opportunity to serve Krishna, to do something where we can show our love for him. Okay, so we have to try and engage in this kind of devotional service. Prabhupada has made it very, very simple for us. And so we should try to engage in service to Lord Krishna so that we are able to please our Lord and Master. And actually, if we see that the pastimes that Lord Krishna is having in the spiritual world, we are also supposed to be part of it, right? Because Lord Krishna has these pastimes with his devotees, and we are also parts and parcels of Krishna. But the problem is we wanted to enjoy separately, and that is why we are out of those pastimes. So our goal should be to purify our consciousness. And then, the Lord's pastimes are there. It is open. Lord Krishna doesn't say that no one else can enter my pastimes. He is actually waiting for each and every one of us to return home, like a loving father whose child has gone away, and the father is waiting for the child to return and engage in loving pastimes. And Lord Krishna is waiting for all of us. Next, what are the different rasas in which these pastimes take place? This particular shloka is talking about the amorous pastimes, that is the Madhurya rasa. But there are other rasas also, like there is Shanta rasa, there is Sakhya rasa, there is Dasya, there is Vatsalya. And so there are different modes in which the Lord can be served. And all these modes and their pastimes are taking place in the spiritual world. But the problem is that if we don't have the correct guidance, then it becomes very difficult to understand these pastimes. Say, for example, talking about Krishna's pastimes with his friends, where he goes and steals butter from the house of the gopis. Now, for normal people, if they hear this, it gets a little confusing. Why does he have to go and steal? If he's God, doesn't he actually have everything? And what kind of a pastime is this where he actually has to go and steal? But when we read scriptures, when we hear from the right authority, we understand that the gopis are great devotees of Lord Krishna. They were actually waiting for Krishna to come. They were making that butter for Krishna. They wanted Krishna to come and steal that butter because that was a way for them to meet Krishna. That was a way for them to interact with Krishna. And why were they going and complaining to Mother Yashoda? Because that was a chance for them to go and see Krishna again and talk more and more about Krishna. So this is something that becomes very, very sweet when we know the reason behind it. If we don't know the reason, then we get confused and then we misinterpret things. But when we know the reason, then we are able to understand why everything is happening. Similarly, things like Rasa Leela or, telling Arjuna to go and fight and telling Yudhishthir to lie, all these things. There's so many things, so many pastimes of Krishna, which become very difficult to understand because we may not have that kind of intelligence. And that is why it is important to hear from Parampara. When we hear from our Guru, when we hear from Srila Prabhupada and our other acharyas in the Parampara, then we understand why something is happening, why Krishna is doing something. We understand that whatever is enjoyable in this material world must be enjoyed by Krishna. Okay? So all these things become very, very clear and become very simple to understand when explained by the right authority. That is why it is always stressed that we hear from the right source and we don't go here and there hearing from every single person. Today's age, it has become so accessible that we can hear from anyone speaking in any corner of the world. But we have to be very, very careful not to hear from unauthorized sources. Okay? Another aspect about Krishna's pastime that Srila Prabhupada mentions in the Nectar of Devotion is that his Vrindavan pastimes, they are divided into three categories according to Krishna's age. His transcendental pastimes, they are executed in three stages and they are known as Kaumara, Poganda and Keshora. So Kaumara pastimes are pastimes that take place from Lord Krishna's appearance till he is 5 years of age. Then Poganda pastimes when he is from 6 to 10 years of age. Then Keshora pastimes when he is from 11 to 15 years of age. So the Kaumara pastimes are mostly with his parents because he is 0 to 5 years. And then Poganda pastimes 6 to 10 is where he is with the cowherd boys. He's running around playing with them. Keshora pastimes are mostly with the gopis. And then after 15 years, Lord Krishna moves to Mathura. So the Vrindavan pastimes are till 15 years of age. So when we are reading all these various references, we are understanding that firstly, Lord Krishna's pastimes are divine. There is nothing materialistic about them, and there is so much variety in his pastimes. There's pastimes with Gopal, there's pastimes with his parents, there's pastimes with gopis. And then after he moves out of Vrindavan also, his pastimes continue because he meets the Pandavas and then Bhagavad Gita, then marrying Rukmini Devi's other wives. So Lord Krishna's pastimes always keep continuing and they are very, very beautiful. Now, in this regard, there is another shloka in Srimad Bhagavatam, that is 1.3.28, which is a very, very famous shloka, where it is mentioned that Ete Chamshakalapamsha Krishnastu Bhagwan Swayam Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Hridayanti Yuge Yuge, where it is mentioned that before this shloka, there are various incarnations of Lord Krishna mentioned. So this particular shloka then tells that Lord Krishna is the supreme. All these incarnations that have been mentioned, they are portions or plenary portions or portions of the plenary portions of the Lord. But Lord Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. And all of them appear on planets whenever there is a disturbance created by the atheists. So the Lord comes to protect the thieves. Now, in this particular purport, there is one section where Prabhupada mentions something which is linked to our discussion today. Prabhupada mentions, I'll just go through that particular section and we'll read that. Yeah. So Prabhupada mentioned here that all the different indirectly or directly empowered incarnations of the Lord manifested different features, but Lord Krishna, the primeval Lord, exhibited the complete features of Godhead, and that thus it is confirmed that he is the source of all other incarnations. And then Prabhupada mentions, and the most extraordinary feature exhibited by Lord Shri Krishna was his internal energetic manifestation of his pastimes with the cowherd girls. His pastimes with the gopis are all displays of transcendental existence, bliss, and knowledge. Although these are manifested apparently as sex love, the specific attraction of his pastimes with the gopis should never be misunderstood. The Bhagavatam relates these transcendental pastimes in the 10th canto, and in order to reach the position to understand the transcendental nature of Lord Krishna's pastimes with the gopis, the Bhagavatam promotes the student gradually in 9 other cantos. So this section of the purport of the shloka, Prabhupada is explaining the same concept, that Lord Krishna's pastimes with the gopis should never be taken to be on a mundane level. Okay, it should never be misunderstood. And these pastimes, they come in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Before that, the reader is supposed to have read and understood 9 cantos. 9 cantos, which first of all describe what this universe is like, then who is God, then all the different incarnations of Krishna, the avatars of Krishna, how majestic the Lord is, how great the Lord is, what great activities the Lord does. Then comes this section of the pastimes with the gopis. So if we have read the 9 cantos properly, then we are eligible to read about the gopis, and only then we'll be able to understand this correctly. Otherwise, what happens is that the understanding remains very superficial and it is misinterpreted. This whole Leela with the gopis, which is something of a very divine nature, is made to be very mundane. Okay, that is why Bhagavatam prepares us through 9 cantos first before getting to these pastimes with the gopis. In Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela 9.4 purport, also Prabhupada is saying something about this particular section where people misunderstand the pastimes of Lord Krishna. Prabhupada says that there are many fools who consider Krishna Leela to be a subject of art and who write or paint pictures about the pastimes of Lord Krishna with the gopis, sometimes depicting them in a manner practically obscene. This happens very often. Then Prabhupada further says that these fools take pleasure in material sense gratification, but one who wants to make advancement in spiritual life must scrupulously avoid their literature. Unless one is a servant of Krishna and the Vaishnavas, as Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami presents himself to be in offering respects to Lord Chaitanya, his associates and his disciples, one should not attempt to write transcendental literature. So Prabhupada is calling such so-called scholars fools who misinterpret the pastimes and they think that Krishna Leela is a subject of art. So they will make, they'll write some books or there'll be artists who will present these pastimes in a very obscene manner. And Prabhupada says that they take pleasure in material sense gratification. So we have to stay away from these kind of people. We have to completely avoid reading or seeing such things. And we have to be very, very careful not to read the books written by such so-called scholars. And Prabhupada is saying that unless one is coming in parampara, unless one is a servant of Krishna and the Vaishnavas, one should not even attempt to write transcendental literature. But these days, anyone can get up and write, anyone can write a commentary on Bhagavad Gita. Because if they write their own book in their own name, nobody is going to read it. But Bhagavad Gita is a widely accepted theistic book. It's the scripture that is widely accepted. So anyone who wants to present his or her own philosophy can just take the name of Bhagavad Gita and write whatever they want to write. So Prabhupada time and again warns us to stay away from such kind of speculation about Lord Krishna. Because who are we to speculate anything about the Supreme Lord? We are full of so many faults, and so we should never attempt to, first of all, write any such literature, and then secondly, we have to stay away from these kind of literature, these kind of paintings. Be very, very careful to avoid these completely. Now, another reference that is from Srimad Bhagavatam only. This is from 10th canto, 77th chapter, 31st verse, where it is mentioned in the purport by Srila Prabhupada that all the great Bhagavatam commentators conclude that grief, illusion, attachment, and fear, which arise out of ignorance of the soul, can never be present in the transcendental dramatic pastimes enacted by the Lord. Okay, so this particular purport again is highlighting the divine nature of Lord Krishna's pastimes. So it is mentioned that grief, illusion, attachment, fear, which arise out of ignorance of the soul, they are never present in the transcendental pastimes of Krishna. And Srila Jiva Goswami gives an example of one pastime to illustrate. He actually gives many examples. We'll discuss one that Prabhupada mentions, that when the cowherd boys entered the mouth of Aghasura, Aghasura was the snake demon, Lord Krishna was apparently astonished. And similarly, when Brahma took away Lord Krishna's cowherd boyfriends and calves, the Lord at first began to look for them as if he did not know where they were. So why is Lord Krishna doing all these things? Because he's playing the part of an ordinary human being and he wants to relish that transcendental pastime with his devotees. And that is why he actually acts like a small, innocent boy. Prabhupada mentions that one should never think the personality of Godhead is an ordinary person. As Shukadev Goswami explains, so when we are reading these pastimes and we understand them through parampara, we understand, oh, Lord Krishna, why is he feeling sad? Why is he feeling astonished that his friends have disappeared when Brahma takes them away? He wants to feel that separation. He wants to enjoy that rasa. That is why he is in that position. But one has to always understand that Lord Krishna is the supreme. Always remember that he is not an ordinary person. And that becomes clear when we are reading with the help of Srila Prabhupada's books. Another reference is from 10th canto, 33rd verse, the 33rd chapter, 39th verse, where Prabhupada mentions in the purport that anyone who faithfully hears or describes the Lord's playful affairs with the young gopis of Vrindavan will attain the Lord's pure devotional service. Thus, he will quickly become sober and conquer lust, the disease of the heart. Now, this shloka 10:33-39 is glorifying Lord Krishna's pastimes with the gopis, and it says that one who faithfully hears or describes these playful affairs, they themselves will quickly become sober and they'll be able to conquer lust. That is how great these pastimes are. So, how can someone think that these are lustful pastimes? Not at all. How are these pastimes being enacted? What is the great nature? That is something of a very high understanding. Until we have reached that stage of understanding, we should at least theoretically tell ourselves through all these references that okay, maybe I am not able to understand how great these pastimes are, but if it is mentioned in Bhagavatam that someone who reads these pastimes faithfully will be able to overcome lust, that means these pastimes are not lustful. That means these pastimes are of a very divine nature, of a very pure nature. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, if we see in his example, he was a very strict sannyasi. He would stay away from women. He would not interact at all. He was very, very strict in his vow of sannyas. But he glorified the pastimes of Lord Krishna with the gopis. He would personally hear them. This shows that, how elevated these pastimes are, how great and pure these pastimes are. Now, another reference from Srimad Bhagavatam, we read in the 7th canto, 1st chapter, verse 30. In the purport, Prabhupada mentions that if one who hears of the gopis' lusty behavior with Krishna becomes free from lusty desires, certainly the gopis who approached Krishna became free from all such desires. So again, here it is mentioned that if we hear of the interactions between Lord Krishna and the gopis, then one becomes free from one's own lusty desires. Okay. And then another reference that comes is from Srimad Bhagavatam 10:30, 35 to 36. I'll just read that. Here it is mentioned that as the gopis wandered about, their minds completely bewildered, they pointed out various signs of Krishna's pastimes. The particular gopi whom Krishna had led into a secluded forest when he had abandoned all the other young girls began to think herself the best of women. My beloved has rejected all the other gopis, she thought. Even though they are driven by Cupid himself, he has chosen to reciprocate with me alone. Now, this particular section is telling about the time when Lord Krishna disappeared from the vision of the gopis, and then Radharani, what she's thinking, what is mentioned is given. Now, Prabhupada mentions here in the purport that the Lord arranges all this to reveal the gopis' unparalleled devotion for him, a devotion whose intensity fully manifests in moments of separation. So this helps us understand that this is something of a very, very pure nature. Their love for Krishna was so concentrated that we cannot even imagine. So there should never be a question of misrepresenting or taking this as something that is on a very materialistic level. And the shloka previous to this also, Shukadev Goswami continues that Lord Krishna enjoyed with that gopi, and he enjoys within himself, being self-satisfied and complete in himself. So Shukadev Goswami is telling him that Lord Krishna is complete. He is self-satisfied. Atma Rama. Okay. So it's completely in contrast with the wretchedness of ordinary lusty men and hard-hearted women. So Lord Krishna's love for the gopis is not something of a mundane materialistic level, because Lord Krishna is satisfied within himself. The gopis, Radharani, they are all expansions of Krishna. So these pastimes that are taking place between the Lord and his expansion. And in the purport to this verse, Prabhupada is saying that this verse directly refutes the superficial criticism materialistic people sometimes direct against Lord Krishna's pastimes. The philosopher Aristotle claimed that ordinary activities are unworthy of God, and with this idea in mind, some people declare that since the activities of Lord Krishna resemble those of ordinary human beings, he cannot be the absolute truth. So Prabhupada again is telling the consciousness with which these pastimes have to be heard and understood. And then Prabhupada further continues, but in this verse, Shukadev Goswami emphatically points out that Lord Krishna acts on the liberated platform of spiritual self-satisfaction. This is not materialistic self-satisfaction also. This is liberated platform of spiritual self-satisfaction. That is Lord Krishna's position. This fact is indicated here by the terms Atmarata, Atmarama, and Akhandita. It is inconceivable to ordinary people that a handsome young boy and a beautiful young girl enjoying romantic conjugal affairs in the forest moonlight can be engaging in pure activity, free from egoistic desire and lust. So when people hear of these groves of Vrindavan and these pastimes at night, they have a very concocted and distorted version of the whole thing. But Prabhupada is saying that for them it is inconceivable to understand that these pastimes are very pure. They are free from egoistic desire and lust. And Prabhupada says that yet, while Lord Krishna is inconceivable to ordinary persons, those who love him can easily realize the absolute pure nature of his activities. So again and again, this is being stressed that these pastimes are of a very pure nature. And in fact, Prabhupada has mentioned that Krishna Leela is the boat by which one can achieve the ultimate goal of life. So we have to hear Krishna Leela with so much love and so much affection. So because that is the boat that is going to carry us out of this material world. The Lord is self-satisfied. He is very happy in the spiritual world. Why does he have to come down? No, it's just killing demons. He is seated as Paramatma in everyone's heart. Just, with one blink of his eye, he can kill any demon that he wants. But he comes because he wants to engage in these loving pastimes, so that we have these wonderful scriptures which we can read, and these give us a glimpse of how beautiful the spiritual world is, and we get motivated that yes, that is something where I also want to go. Another reference is Srimad Bhagavatam 10th canto 46th verse 21, where it is mentioned that as we remember the wonderful deeds Krishna performed, his playful sidelong glances, his smiles and his words, O Uddhava, we forget all our material engagements. The gopis are telling this to Uddhava, that just the remembrance of Krishna is so beautiful that we forget all material engagements. See, that is why these pastimes are so important for us to read and understand and bring it in our meditation. Think about them again and again, because they will help us forget our material engagements. We'll be able to cut the shackles of attachment and our own inhibitions and our own, these different kind of anarthas that we are dealing with. The Lord's pastimes are so powerful that when we are reading them, that when we are narrating them to someone, they help us become purified ourselves. Okay. So that is the divine nature of these pastimes of Lord Krishna that Brahmaji is talking about in this verse. And one last reference we'll take. This is from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 20.397. Here, again, this divine nature of pastimes of Krishna is glorified. It is mentioned here that the eternal pastimes of Krishna are continuously taking place in the original Goloka Vrindavan planet. These same pastimes are gradually manifested within the material world in each and every Brahmanda. So it's not that Putana was killed once here and then that pastime never ever takes place. No, Krishna's pastimes are continuously taking place from one universe to the other, from one place to the other. It's taking place at all times. And they are always present in the material world in one of the many universes. So in our universe, okay, it happened 5,000 years ago, but after that it is happening in other universes. Even at this moment as we are speaking, all these different pastimes are taking place somewhere or the other. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains that these pastimes appear in the universes one after the other, just as the sun moves across the sky and measures the time. Krishna may be manifested in this universe at one moment, but after his birth, this pastime is manifested in the next universe. So he is taking different avatars, and different new pastimes are happening everywhere. And when Krishna comes, his pastimes last for 125 years, right? So after this 125 years, this 125-year period that is taking place in our solar system, this is actually just one moment for Krishna in Krishna's lifetime. Okay, that is what is mentioned here. The 125 years calculated in our solar system to be Krishna's lifetime equal one moment for Krishna. Okay, so one moment these pastimes are manifested in one universe, and the next moment they are manifested in another universe. So it's constantly taking place, and there are unlimited universes, and Krishna's pastimes are manifested one moment after the other in all of them. Okay, so that is the greatness of Lord Krishna's pastimes. So just to recap what we read today, this beautiful shloka where Brahmaji is talking about the beautiful appearance of Lord Krishna, where he's wearing a garland of flowers and a moon locket, and there is a flute adorning his hand. He's wearing jewel ornaments, and he is enjoying the amorous pastimes of love, and he has a very graceful threefold bending Shyam Sundar form. Okay, so Brahmaji is describing the spiritual world and what Lord Krishna does in the spiritual world, and how beautiful Lord Krishna is. And when in our discussion, we discussed the divine nature of these pastimes, because the shloka is talking about the pastime of love. So we understand that these pastimes are never to be misunderstood through these various references, through these various purports, other shlokas from Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and even the Vedic injunction. We understand that Lord Krishna's pastimes are divyam. And anyone who understands these pastimes will be able to free themselves from the clutches of this material existence. So something that can purify ourselves from lust, something that can grant us liberation from this material world, can never be mundane. It can never be of a perverted way. That's the way people are taking it these days. We also touched upon how people misunderstand the position of God to be an order supplier. They don't understand that our relationship with God is so sweet. He's our master, we are his eternal servants, and in serving our eternal master, we get the ultimate joy, the ultimate happiness. So God should not be taken just as an order supplier. We have to aspire for a position, for a situation where we are able to serve Krishna. And there are many rasas in which, the 5 rasas in which the Lord can be served. And we all are actually, we can, through pure devotional service, experience that love of Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna is waiting with open arms for everyone to return home. And that is why we have these wonderful, beautiful scriptures, by reading which we can go back to Godhead, we can realize our eternal position. We have to chant sincerely, we have to read Prabhupada's books very sincerely, and that is why that is how we will be able to understand. And these pastimes of gopis that is mentioned here, they come in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, after 9 cantos of understanding of who Krishna is. That's when one becomes eligible to understand these pastimes. So Prabhupada warns us that we should never, one who is not a servant of Krishna should never write such literatures, and we should never hear from any unauthorized source about Lord Krishna. These pastimes are very, very beautiful, and we have to be very careful to hear from Parampara. Only then we can understand these pastimes in the correct mode. Okay, so with that I'll stop. If there are any questions, comments, or any points of discussion.
Hare Krishna Mataji, I have one small doubt.
Yes, Mataji.
We understood perfectly that the relationship of Krishna with the gopis are transcendental and the love is very pure, and people, of course, are saying different things. But we have understood that. But then in the purport, the word amorous pastimes is used, Mataji. And amorous word has some other connotation, no, like tending towards sexual love, like that. So why is that word used?
Yes, Mataji. So, what I have heard from devotees is that this kind of amorous, this usage is not the amorous love of the material world. For example, the word lust also is sometimes used for Krishna and the gopis. Sometimes it gets used. But that lust is not the materialistic lust. That is also of a spiritual nature. So, yes, this word that we read, amorous, we have the material understanding, the material meaning, but the usage here is not of the materialistic lust. It is of the spiritual love that Krishna has.
Okay, Mataji. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Dandavat Pranam.
Dandavat Pranam, Mataji. Okay. So if there are no other questions, we'll stop here. Thank you all so much for your patient hearing. And in Friday's class, one Mataji, I don't remember her name, but she had mentioned that how wonderful Prasannatma Prabhu's class was. And yes, indeed, it was very, very beautiful. And she had mentioned that it would be so nice to hear such wonderful lectures again and again. So I think most of you must be aware that all these lectures are available on YouTube in a Consciousness Forum channel. These are all live on YouTube. So we can go back and hear all these lectures again, like Prabhu's lecture from Friday. It was very beautiful. So you can go again and hear it on the YouTube channel in a Consciousness Forum in the live section, because these are all live broadcasted on YouTube. So it's a very wonderful thing for us. We can hear them again and again. So thank you so much. Thank you, all of you. Panchakalpatrubhyascha kripasindubhyeva Patitanam pavanebhyo Shri Vaishnavebhyo namo namah. अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय, श्री ब्रह्म समिता की जय, श्रीला भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर प्रभुपाद की जय, श्रीला प्रभुपाद की जय, श्री गुरु महाराज की जय, अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय. Hare Krishna. Dandavat Pranam, dear devotees. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna. Dandavat Pranam.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Dandavat Pranam.
Dandavat Pranam, Mataji.